Why does everything require an active internet connection? Hello troglodytes, and welcome back to another video. So, in today's episode, we are going to be making a Pi-hole, which is a hardware-based network ad blocker and filter. I'm running this on a Raspberry Pi 4 because I didn't have a Raspberry Pi 4 before, and now I have an example from every major generation of Raspberry Pi. That's pretty cool. Alright, so the first step, so this is why I put the power over Ethernet hats on these things, because I'm going to put it right here on the top of my shelf, as you saw in the intro to my last video. And before, a couple weeks ago, I made a custom little Ethernet cable. And look at that, it's just a single cable, and now it's running. So that's the beauty of power over Ethernet. So, how does a Pi-hole work? A Pi-hole blocks ads by acting as a DNS sinkhole. So to understand what a DNS sinkhole is, you must understand what a DNS server is. So, you have a domain name, which is the human readable alphanumeric address. In this case, raspberrypi.com, or google.com or whatever. It's what you humans will understand. It implies that I'm not a human. Anyway, you have your IP address, which is the actual address of the server. So 104.22.23.160. So when you type raspberrypi.com into your browser, your computer asks a DNS server where to find that domain. The DNS server responds with an IP address, e.g. that. Then your computer queries that IP address for the resource you're looking for. We use domain names because IP addresses aren't very human readable, and it's a lot easier to write raspberrypi.com than typing in a whole bunch of numbers, and much easier to remember raspberrypi.com as well. So usually your computer queries a DNS server hosted somewhere else on the internet. It might be hosted by your internet provider, a website hosting company, or any company that runs a lot of servers. So, just somewhere, some server out there that, again, will connect human readable addresses, that will link human readable addresses to IP addresses. Your machine will submit a domain, and then the DNS server will return the IP address corresponding to that domain. The DNS server doesn't care if the domain provides something you want, or an ad. So yeah, it doesn't discriminate. It just says, okay, you want to connect to this address? Alright, buddy, here you go. So here's where the Pi-hole comes in. A Pi-hole stands between your network and a DNS server. Consider a client device like your smart toilet. Oh God. Smart toilet. Okay, hold on. Your smart toilet performing a DNS lookup for a domain. The Pi-hole in your network acts like a DNS server. DNS lookups from all client devices, whether it's your smart toilet, your phone, go to the Pi-hole. But the Pi-hole doesn't store a perfect up-to-date mapping of all domain names to IP addresses. Instead, So instead, Pi-hole queries a real DNS server outside of your network. However, before it queries that real DNS server, Pi-hole checks a block list. Alright, so basically, if it's for an unblocked domain, it'll, okay, this domain is good. So the DNS request, your device will send a DNS request. Pi-hole will be like, that domain's good. The DNS server will spit back the IP address your computer will connect to the IP address. However, if it is a blocked domain, such as an advertisement or whatever, something you don't like, the Pi-hole will be like, no, that domain is bad, the domain is in our block list, sends back an unresolvable IP so that it can't connect to it. So basically, a Pi-hole blocks requests made to advertisement domains on your network before the request ever leaves your network. Your client device cannot connect to domains that host ads, but can connect to domains that host useful content. So there we go. That's how a Pi-hole works. I didn't know that. That's pretty interesting. To install a Pi-hole on your network, you'll need to do the following things. Configure a Raspberry Pi running Raspberry Pi OS. Alright, I have that. It's running Raspberry Pi OS. Set up Pi-hole software on your Raspberry Pi. That's what we're going to do right now. And then direct DNS queries on your router to the Raspberry Pi. So the setup script is relatively okay. So now that the Pi-hole is already set up correctly, it's been updated, we've SSH'd back into it. Run the following single line command to run the Pi-hole script. Is that it? The setup script is relatively self-explanatory, but follow these tips if you aren't sure how to proceed. So let's run through the script and we'll follow their guidance here. That always sounds like a good idea. Alright. YOLO. Pi-hole automated installer. This installer will transform your device into a network-wide ad blocker. Okay. Pi-hole is free, but powered by your donations. I'll consider that later if I like it. Pi-hole is a server, so it needs a static IP address to function properly. Yes, that's important. If you have not already done so, you must ensure that this device has a static IP. Depending on your operating system, there are many ways to achieve this through DHCP reservation or by manually assigning one. Please continue when the static IP addressing has been configured. Alright, so static IP is needed. I have reserved the addresses through DHCP, so that is good. Select an upstream DNS provider to use your own select custom. So they recommend using OpenDNS. That's what I'll use. OpenDNS. Okay, OpenDNS. Pi-hole relies on third-party lists in order to block ads. You can use this. You can use the suggestions below and/or add your own after installation. So yes. So Stephen Black's Unified Host Lists. What I want. So I'll click yes. You want to install the admin web interface. Yes. A web server is required for the admin web interface. Do you want to install Lite ETPD in the required PHP modules? Note, if you disable this and do not have an existing web server and the required stuff, it won't work. I'll say yes. Would you like to enable query logging? Yes. Privacy mode for faster than light. Oh, that seems great. Let's use anonymous mode. Oops. Alright, anonymous mode. Alright. It's doing its thing, I guess. Alright, so the installation is complete. Setup is complete. Okay. The screen shows the IP address of your Pi-hole and links to the admin interface and your administrator password. Save this password somewhere safe. Save the IP address. Know what that is. Alright. Configure your network to use Pi-hole. So, configure your Pi-hole as your network's DNS server. This is the most common way of configuring a Pi-hole. For this method, you'll first assign the Raspberry Pi a static IP address. I've done that. And then point your router's DNS server settings to the Pi-hole static IP address. With this setup, your router controls Your Raspberry Pi a static IP address. IP addresses are unique numeric codes that allow you to directly interact with the device on your network. For instance, many routers automatically assign themselves the first address in the IP block they're using, such as that, yes. Most networks use DHCP, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, to assign IP addresses to devices automatically. These IP addresses are known as dynamic IP addresses, but they can change at any time. To run Pi-hole on your network, we recommend assigning your Pi-hole a static IP address. A static IP address never changes. This allows devices on your network to always find the Pi-hole at the same address. Alright, so at this point, you have several options for how you can set a static IP address for your Pi-hole. You can either just go into your router and in the list of devices, you can probably just click something that just says like reserve. So it'll have like a little, a circle with a cross on it. It says this device is reserved in the DHCP settings. And then that'll just automatically, set your Pi-hole as static and you don't have to do anything. If you want to manually configure it, to set a static IP address, if you can't just do it automatically like I said before, basically on your Pi-hole in the SSH prompt, to find the IP address, you type in hostname-i, and that will give you the local IP address of your Pi-hole. You can ignore all that, that's a bunch of gibberish, just look at this part, that's your local IP address. So then to find the hardware address, aka the MAC address of your Pi, you just type this command. If you're on Wi-Fi, leave it as WLAN 0. If you're on Ethernet, type in ETH0. And then that will give you the hardware address of your Pi, aka the MAC address, aka the physical hardware identifier, so that way your router knows, oh, this is this device. Always assign it this IP address, and everything will just keep working in the future. And then for your host name, your host name's right here. So this is your host name, Pi-hole. I have set it, or if I was like, if I just close out of this, from my main computer, my host name is TrogStation Pro. It's basically like this is your username. And then this is your host name right here. Alright, so at this point, now that you have your static IP address set, basically go in to your router's DHCP server settings and set the IP address of your Pi-hole as the DNS server, as the DNS for the DHCP server. That will basically direct all the devices on your network to automatically use the Pi-hole. That's why you set it up this way. So that devices will, automatically use your Pi-hole as their DNS server. Do not go into the wide area network settings. Don't set it as the DNS server for the outside of your network. Leave that alone. The only thing you should touch is the DHCP server settings. I'll talk about why that's important later. And yeah. So set the IP address of your Pi-hole as DNS number 1. And then for DNS number 2 or 3 or however many more there are, set those all to 0.0.0.0, aka an unresolvable IP. So that way your devices will be forced to go through the Pi-hole. And then, bada bing, bada boom, it should just work. You shouldn't have to touch anything, you shouldn't have to mess with anything. You can if you want to, but at this point, it should be good, and you should be happy. So, yay! It's really that simple. Alrighty then. So, after much futzing around and rebooting of computers and routers and stuff, I'm pretty sure this is working. So, it says that if I go to a website that normally has lots of ads, so this website normally has tons of banner ads everywhere around this box, and none of them are there. I don't see any ads right here at all. Websites with lots of ads. Alright. NewYorkFamily.com. What is this? Do I get ads there? I'll go to that website. What is this website? And they say this is supposed to have lots of ads, and I don't see any ads. And total queries blocked, so that's going up. That's all working as it should. I'm thinking. Scroll up here. Let's go to a different one. DMZ. Ooh, that would be a nasty one. Let's see. DMZ. Never gone to this website in my life. My God. I mean, I see their thing. Wow, Taylor Swift hoping for another Super Bowl trip. Wow. Okay. A neat jacket. Cool. Don't see any ads. I just see a whole bunch of garbage, but no ads, so that's cool. Alright, so a week has passed, and let me tell you everything that I have done since the previous chapter of the video. So, the first thing I realized is that I had set my router incorrectly. Basically, what I had done is I had set the Pi-hole as the DNS on the wide area network side of the router. So basically on the, on the open internet side. On the, the open internet side. Imagine that's a cloud right there. So basically what devices were doing, so this is like, a device right here. So basically what I had done was I had set the devices to, so because I had set the router to have the Pi-hole on the WAN side, the devices weren't seeing the Pi-hole as their local DNS. So what was happening is the internet traffic, so the internet traffic was going out of the device into the router. The router was then saying, okay, well, the wide area DNS is the Pi-hole. So it was going back out of the router into the Pi-hole. The Pi-hole is like, okay, we process your request, and then back to the router. The process request would then go back to the router. And then the router would send them to the internet. And that was, it technically worked, but that would mean that pretty much none of the devices on my network would actually show up in the Pi-hole, so you don't know what's actually going through and what isn't. It was technically working, but not in a way that not in a way that I really wanted. So, what I then did was, okay, well that was wrong. So I went and so I reset the router. I went and set the Pi-hole as the DNS server. So as the DHCP server, which I should have done originally. I didn't see those settings in there before, so whoops. So now what's happening is the traffic comes out of the computer into the Pi-hole, because now the Pi-hole is the local DNS server for all the devices on my network. Comes out of the Pi-hole into the router, where all the accepted requests come out of the Pi-hole. It filters when it needs to. All the good stuff comes out of the Pi-hole into the router, through the gateway, and to the internet. So instead of going like wee, it now goes, correct. So yeah. So that was that mistake I had made. Then the other thing I did was I had set my Pi-hole to show me everything, which isn't a terrible thing, but basically that if you don't know what you're doing, you're like, oh my god, what are all these domains? And you're like, what are all these domains? Oh my god, this is crazy. Well, yeah. So I was like, oh my god, what is this? What is this? What is all this? What is this? Oh. It's fine. So I was, trying to track domains down, and what is this? What is that? You realize that most of these domains, nobody knows what they are. Even if they think they know, they don't know. Nobody knows. So, if it's in all of your, basically, if your ad lists are set correctly, it's fine. But yeah, once I figured that out, and once I figured out, okay, well, these are the typical domains that go through my network. These are the typical stuff that's blocked. This is the typical stuff that isn't blocked. Does all the functions for my devices that I want to work? Yes. We're good. So, now it's configured correctly. The only other thing I have is, I've been thinking about what I want to call this thing long term, and I'm between 3 different names. So basically, these are the 3 different names, or titles, I guess, I was thinking about for the Pi-hole. I guess vote in the comments below which of these you think is the best. We have the Gatekeeper, because it is, blocking the gate. It is, doing that. And we have the Guardian, because it is protecting my network. And we have the Janitor, because it's just, cleaning everything up. Tidying things up. Tidying up your requests. As it does in the background. Doing its thing. So yeah. If you made it this far in the video, you can vote on what you think is the best down in the comments below. Boost engagement, all that kind of stuff. Help the algorithm, blah, 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 blah. Classic YouTuber crap. And yeah. So, that's about it. Bye!